Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Moore, Manager of Live Content at AVIXA, and welcome to the May Conferencing and Collaboration Power Hour, where corporate technology managers and integrators can get the latest on key developments and trends for conferencing and collaboration. Today, we're talking about where the workforce is now post-COVID-19. This webinar is being brought to you by our webinar sponsor, BlueJean by Verizon. This webinar has been approved for one CTS and CTSD RU. Please allow 5 to 7 business days for the RU to appear on your transcript. If you have a question, please email webinars@avixa.org. Today's webinar will be approximately 45 to 60 minutes in length. The audience questions will be addressed by the panel during the webinar and after if there is time available. Please enter your questions into the Q&A window, which can be found by clicking the icon at the bottom of your video box. Please do not enter your questions into the chat box because they sometimes will get missed. Also, if you can introduce yourself in the chat box of what your name is and where you're from, we'd love to hear from you. If you have missed one of our other conferencing and collaboration power hours and you wish you hadn't, visit avixa.org/training to see the webinars. Today's webinar will be available online at the same link in 5 business days. No RUs are available for watching a recorded webinar. Today's panel will be moderated by Pete Coman of PTS. Chris Janes, Kay Sargent, and Rob Woods will also be joining our panel. And now I will turn things over to Pete Coman, who will be our moderator for the session. And I hope everyone enjoys the webinar today.
Thank you, Lauren. G'day, everyone. I'm Pete Techman Coman, and welcome to another AVIXA Conferencing and Collaboration Power Hour brought to you by BlueJeans by Verizon. We have an exciting panel on today, and we're really excited to actually sort of delve into all the details of where the workplace is and where it's going. But, you know, if we look back at 2020, it wasn't a very good year for most people. I think that's fair to say. Unless, of course, you're this guy. So 18 short months ago, this is what our workplaces typically look like. They were hustling, bustling workplaces, people everywhere. And then almost overnight, they were transformed into working from home, juggling children, working in cramped spaces with lots of noise going on all around us. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. So where is the workforce now? And will we be working from home in the next 6 to 12 months? There's been a lot of talk about hybrid models, you know, people working part-time at home and part-time in the office. And I think it's fair to say that we probably won't be going back to this style of workplace anytime soon. But what will the office look like? Will we take a turn back in time and will we end up with cubicles like this to try and maintain the number of people in the workplace that we're used to? Or will we require more real estate, more space in the office as we require to actually socially distance and separate from one another? I think one thing is for sure is one size won't fit all. Another important factor that we need to consider when returning to the office is making sure that we have a safe work environment. And technology plays a key role in that. I mean, will we see personal devices being used to control our workplace, to control a meeting space, to control the environmental elements that we have within a workspace? Will we see more touchless devices, such as one-touch meeting joins? Or will voice finally make its way into the corporate workplace and to give us a true touchless environment? And will we see more wireless technology being deployed, being able to share our own personal devices and wirelessly collaborate with others? And will this result in less meeting rooms? We're so used to actually meeting from our desk these days and taking these kinds of calls. Will that transpose into the workplace once we return? And how will analytical sensors play a pivotal role in all of this technology in the new digital workplace experience? And with all this technology sitting on the network, what effect will it have on our IT infrastructure? So to help me answer some of these questions, hopefully all of these questions, we have an amazing panel here today. We have Chris Janes. He is the CTO of Mersive Technologies. Many of you on the call would know of Mersive Technologies. They have some great wireless technology sharing, collaboration technology, holder of many patents, a true thought leader in the technology space. And then we have Kay Sargent. So Kay is the senior principal, director of workplace for HOK Architecture. And Kay will bring her own perspective to this event. And many of you would have probably heard of Kay and heard her talk and present it at other events. And you'll know that she brings a lot of knowledge and experience to this panel. So we're really, really excited to hear what Kay has to say. And then we've got Rob Woods, senior sales engineer at Blue Jeans by Verizon, to help us with we're using a lot of conferencing systems these days. So he's going to sort of add his perspective on how UCC platforms will transform the way we work moving forward. So we'll get straight into the panel. First of all, Kay, I would love to hear your perspective on where the workforce is now and what the office of the future will look like and how that will be different post-COVID.
Okay. So, and by the way, everybody out there should know that there's a huge caveat with Pete's question, and that is, Kay, I know you could answer this question for hours and hours and hours, but you have like 2 minutes. So challenge accepted. Here I go. We believe that we are going to officially acknowledge what has organically been happening for decades, an emerging ecosystem of places that really is driving a hybrid solution where people can work from home or in a spoke or in the workplace, and that you don't have to go to the office every single day. You don't have to stay at home every single day. It's kind of this hybrid solution. And in that hybrid solution, the purpose of place becomes really critical. We can no longer design offices like it is a place that people have to go to. And so it can just be, right? It has to be amazing enough that it's enticing and I actually want to be there. And we believe that there are 12 lasting ramifications of COVID that are going to stick with us. One is we're going to see a lot more remote work programs. 2, we're going to be giving people more options and choices about when and where they can work and maybe unassigned seating. 3, we're going to see lobbies transitioning into engagement spaces or grounding spaces or a transition into the building, kind of screening spaces. 4, we're going to stop having these massive, huge openings of just, endless seas of workstations, and we're going to start dividing things up a little bit more into neighborhoods with some shielding and boundaries for a multitude of reasons. 5, we're going to need more storage. 6, we're going to need more HVAC, fresh air intake, filtration, etc. 7, we are going to have to finally acknowledge that we need to use technology to reduce touch points and to give people more access and control. Number 8, we're going to have to rework bathrooms. Number 9, we're going to have to create a variety of meeting spaces. We can't just design a room, put the biggest table that fits in there and the maximum number of chairs. Number 10, we're going to need increased hand washing. 11, more controls for visitors. Maybe they never get into the elevators. Maybe they never come into your space. Maybe you meet them in the lobby. Maybe they only go into one room. And 12, we're going to see a new minimalism rise as people put things away. They're not always there. There's not as much out. And so again, we're going to have to create spaces that are really intriguing and enticing with the best technology, the best ergonomics, something I can't get at home, but is worth me going to the office 1, 2, 3, 4 days a week, depending on what I do and what I need to be doing.
So it has to be a better experience, right? There has to be something compelling to drag people back into the office, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and think about what you're missing now, right? And I
Mhm.
think what we're missing is our colleagues, services, amenities, maybe good ergonomics,
Mhm.
and the best technology. And so I think we have to provide kind of a home version and then an upscaled, amazing collective version in the workplace that makes me want to go there 2 or 3
Yeah.
days a week. Because if you're not giving me anything better in the office, then why?
Yeah. Yep. No, totally agree. Totally agree. It is, we have a lot of work to do, that's for sure, if we're to get back to the office anytime soon. Rob, pre-COVID, the majority of us were required to physically be in the workplace, in the office. Obviously, that model has now changed. And I'm sure with your role at Blue Jeans, you would have experienced firsthand a huge shift in working styles. Can you describe to me what you're seeing in the market, and are people still working remotely, and have they adopted a hybrid model, and how many days a week are they coming into the office, and where do you see all these things moving forward?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're spot on with that. We have seen a lot of shift in the workplace. Fortunately, we've always had the ability to work remotely at Blue Jeans. That's what our technology provides. But we are seeing a lot of companies shift to their operating posture, meaning they once would require somebody to be in between the four walls, and that's no longer possible right now because of COVID and other factors. But specifically around what we're seeing a lot more work from home. We will say that we are seeing a little bit of a hybrid starting to come again, where people are slowly but surely reacclimating into the office spaces, hopefully safely. But we've seen a huge tick. All collaboration solutions have seen a huge tick up since the beginning of COVID. And I think that's for obvious reasons. But I think moving forward, we expect to see a lot more organizations not only um, remain with the option to work remotely, but actually encourage it, because they don't want people coming into the office, to a lot of case points, and infecting others, or potentially infecting others, or just causing havoc on the ecosystem that is the office space.
Gotcha. And so, what are your thoughts of things moving forward, though? I mean, like, how many days a week? I mean, when you're talking to your clients, how many days a week are they talking about coming back into the office?
It's
Is that
really up in
discussed?
the Yeah, it's really up in the air. I mean, on our calls, we're saying, hey, what does your return to office plan look like?
Mm-hmm.
How are you enabling people to join their meetings or return into the office space? And by and large, it's staggered, right? It's only limited people allowed into the office. You have to be whitelisted to be able to access the building. And when we ask the question about what do you see in 6 months, it's unknown, right?
Mm.
Hopefully, with the vaccination, people are starting to get them, and it'll start transitioning back to the co-working experience. And I think that that's what I personally miss, is the ability to go into the offices and actually hear the conversations that are happening. I'm in my own home office here, and I can't hear that. I can't
Yeah.
interact with people. So I think that there are ways to do that remotely, but
Mm.
you really need to have that in person. And that's why I go to like a remote office, a co-working space, if you will, that is, to Kay's point, very unassigned seating.
It's those water cooler moments that I think a lot of us are all missing, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Chris, over to you. We often talk about emerging technologies and how they will support the hybrid workplace. But what I would like to know is what technologies are no longer needed, and are these devices that we're used to seeing in the workplace? Well, I mean, will those devices simply just disappear? I mean, the VGA is an example, right? I mean, that took forever to disappear.
It did. Yeah, no, Pete, that's an awesome question. I guess I would start by pointing out that technology is subject to the same evolutionary pressures that biological systems are. So let's think about it that way. And if you do, you realize that we just went through a massive ecosystem disruption, which means things are going to go extinct and some things will accelerate and evolve really rapidly. And your question is which of those are subject to extinction? I I think that the obvious choices are things that were already on their way out. So an in-room control panel, for example, is a really good example of that. I had customers for a long time saying things like, I can't wait to get rid of all those panels. They're just a big pain. Turns out that users way more want to interact with the device they come to the room with anyway, as long as you can make it as simple and as elegant to do that as an infrastructural piece. So, I almost would encourage everybody, listening in today to think about look around the rooms that you use to interact with in the workplace, and what components of that could you do on your own personal device, right? It's sort of like the days of, you realized you had the iPhone or a phone in your pocket and it could do everything that the car nav independent piece of hardware used to sit on your dashboard could do. It's like that we're in that era for sure now. So you got to ask yourself, is it the booking panel outside of the room? I suspect it is. That'll go away, especially in a hybrid workplace where ad hoc and opportunistic collaboration is super precious. And knowing when some of my colleagues arrived on campus maybe that day gives me a chance to dive into a space that's very different than the old room booking workflow that used to exist that hasn't been, to be honest, rethought since the late 90s or something. So I think that's going to be suspect. I think we want to rethink some of the ways that we find resources and even find collaborators. So it'll become a really interesting balance between what technologies can we get out of the way and what benefits get accelerated there, especially around my own engagement, ease of use, the human-centered need to find colleagues and collaborate.
So two things. You mentioned control panels. And you mentioned the use of mobile devices or personal devices to control the space. One, do you see voice assistants, like Google Home, Alexa, Siri, those kinds of assistants? Do you see them making their way into the workplace? And two, do you see a need for cables moving forward, HDMI cables, USB cables, or will we be going totally wireless to try and help with the touchless environment?
No, Pete, I promise I didn't ask you to ask me that because, the whole company that I founded is based on wireless. So the idea really is that if I am it all started, I used to teach at a university, and you could tell that students are very, very engaged with their own device. And the absolute wrong thing to do was to say, you have to put that phone in a cubby somewhere and now use this other stuff to learn, right? That's been happening in the corporate enterprise space as well. If you walk into a room and you want to collaborate with your colleagues, isn't it more natural to use your own device? You asked about voice. I'll give you a great example. I don't think that voice as infrastructure is coming anytime soon and probably will never take off. Instead, you already have a device that's very good at doing voice interaction. It's in your pocket. It's your smartphone. So if you can bridge the smartphone as a control unit to walk into a room, this is something that, in fact, we're working on in the conferencing side. I want to start a conference call. Your phone could buzz in your pocket and say, I see that there's a meeting on your calendar. Should I start it? And you could answer yes. Now, if you've registered your voice print with your phone, you now controlled the whole room experience, right? You bridged all the devices wirelessly, and it would just work. I think even on our video conferencing side of things, if you think about how that's going to play out, it's a great example. Walk into a room. What's going to go extinct? The hard codec on the wall, the vendor-locked video conferencing system that someone paid $200,000 for you to have a call in. That's gone. Everyone's learned how to have a great call on their laptop at home. They want to come in and do that with better infrastructure in a sort of ease of use way without having to touch new panels and things. So I think that's kind of where we're headed.
Cool. Interesting. Okay. You referred to the post-COVID office as an ecosystem of places. Is that something you can elaborate a little bit on?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of see it as three components. One being the home, okay, we all been there a lot probably. The second being kind of a spoke, or maybe it's a third place, a co-working space. It could also be, some companies have opened up offices in the suburbs because they don't want people to have to come into the downtown areas where either mass transit or traffic or exposure, all those things. It could be a Panera or a Starbucks, or for me, as I travel a lot, I work in airports, which is for me. And then the last one is kind of what we would say the reimagined office, which becomes the hub. It becomes kind of the premier place. It's where gathering. It's where you're collecting, all of your folks. It's the heart and the soul of the organization. And I want to go back to something that Rob said, when he was talking about kind of this hybrid work. All of the research that we've shown shows that the people that are the most engaged are the ones that have some choice. They can work remotely like 2-ish days a week. The people that are the least engaged are either always at home and they often feel isolated or disconnected, or always in the office. And those people tend to take for granted that their colleagues are there and or resent the fact that they have to be there every day. And so they kind of disconnect. And so giving people some choice is, I think, really important. And before COVID, I would say it was 1 to 2 days a week. Now it might be 2 to 3 because working remotely, because it's become more accepted and we have the ability and the technology. But it really, again, is going to depend on your personal preferences, your work styles. We've already seen the younger generation has a desire to get back faster because they might not have the home setup. They may not have the same network that the older generation has of peers and colleagues, et cetera. And it also could depend on where you live. If I live, 3 blocks from my office, then it makes sense for me to go there every day, right? And so I think we're really kind of seeing this ecosystem of options and choices where people can control where they work at any given time. But it's not a free-for-all. What makes this fail is if it is a free-for-all. If you put in policies and practices such as, your whole team should be here on Thursday so that you connect. Then you don't have that fear of missing out, right? I know I'm going to be with my team on Thursday, and I know if I go into the office, that's not a day that Rob or Chris might decide they're going to work from home, and then I went to see you, but you weren't even there, right? And so it can't be a free-for-all. You have to put in some policies and procedures. And just because you're working from home doesn't mean you get to I'm going to take off in the middle of the day and then I'm going to send 20 emails at 10 o'clock at night. And my colleague who was working all day now is barraged at 10 o'clock at night. Like that's, we have to put some rules in place here.
Mm-hmm. And just on that, Kay, I notice myself, like when I travel into the office every day, I notice that's in New York, I notice that on Mondays and Fridays, there's less people on the train. There's less people around. But Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays is like when everyone's coming in. So these 2 days a week that a lot of people are working remotely happen to be the same 2 days. Surely organizations need to be really thinking about having some sort of maybe rotation or something to avoid this everyone in, everyone away, right, on the same day.
Yeah. Well, we kind of say when you're designing a church, not every Sunday is Easter Sunday, but you have to plan for Easter Sunday, yes. Right? But we can basically say, let's spread it out so that not everybody is coming on one day. And maybe there's things you do on Mondays or Fridays that are extra enticing for people to want to come those days. But it's important that we set up those procedures.
Gotcha. And Rob, I'm curious to know, with people working from home or working remotely, are people more productive working from home?
That's a good question. Some people are, right? Some people are much more productive working from home, whereas some people just need that structure and that camaraderie of their coworkers. So I think what it comes down to is give them the choice, because to Kay's point, if you don't give them a choice, it'll inevitably fail. But me personally, I am able to be much more productive at home, but I do like the ability to go into the office, the water cooler conversations, if you will. And I get that now through co-working spaces. There's one down the road from my house, so I go in there once a month to just get some semblance of community around me. I don't necessarily know them, but I see them on a daily basis when I'm in there, or a monthly basis when I'm in there. They're familiar faces. They might be doing completely different work than I am. And there is a level of accessibility to that building that's on my time schedule. So it really works in my favor. Now, I will say that that's not for everyone. I do enjoy the travel aspect of things, the ability to work in an airport. I got most of my work done pre-COVID from airports like Kay has, and I'm sure Chris has in the past. I just hope to get back to that. So for me personally, I would say that I'm more productive working from home or working remotely than I am in an office. But I do like going to the office at least once a week.
Hey, Pete, can I tag in here for a minute? I want to be a little bit of a gadfly here. I think that the world is asking the wrong question. I think we are at a moment where we need to rethink this. Stuck in an old model. Henry Ford once said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said they wanted a faster.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just be honest here. So first of all, people that work from home have always shown that they tend to be more productive. In fact, the studies show that they tend to work 10 hours more than their office-bound colleagues. But the average commute is 10 hours a week. Okay, so what they do is they just roll that commute time into their day. However, just because your inbox is empty doesn't mean you've really produced anything. I think that Henry Ford minute is what it produced what, right? And I think what we really need to be thinking about and what's keeping CEOs up at night is, can my company innovate fast enough to even stay relevant? And innovation often happens when you build social capital, when you come together, and we are suffering right now. That is, the longer we are in isolation, the more we are running out of that social capital that we had when we left the workplace. And so the question is not, are you being productive, and at what cost is that coming, by the way, because we've all been sitting on our butts for a year and it's taking a toll on us mentally and physically. But are we innovating, and are we connected, and do you feel more connected to the company's purpose than before? And we're not asking the right questions, and I think we need to start changing the conversation around that.
Yeah, quality versus quantity.
Yeah, and to your point before, Kay, I mean, you have this younger generation also coming through that need to be mentored, right? So it's our role to ensure that,
and we need them.
Yeah.
Like, I can't figure out how to get my microphone. Like, where's the 17-year-old when I need them, right? Like, to get my microphone to work. Come on.
No, but it is true. We need to make sure that we're giving back. I mean, because typically that's how we've learned ourselves, as being mentored by others. So let's probably not so much focus on ourselves and how productive we are at home, but let's think about how we need to also give back to the next generation as well. I think is a thought that's often overlooked. Chris, back to you. If we look 5 years into the future, what aspects of the workplace can we attribute to the hybrid workplace, and how can we prepare for these changes?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting to think about. Before I answer that, I want to second that last discussion. That's super important. I mean, I think you got to really be aware that we're trading inspiration for personal productivity, which is maybe an okay trade-off for certain work days or for certain work styles. But if you pull that thread, you're going to find that that's not the only way to work. There's a bunch of other work products that we want to go after, like innovation or collaboration or mentorship, or, so I think that's really a key. And it flows into things like how we design our spaces, how we design technology, everything. So it's really key. So going forward in the future, what can we then trace back and say, hey, that came out of the 2020 year? It's interesting, you could even, I have some colleagues that are technologists, and they study these things, and you can even do things like, hey, the water fountain in the enterprise. You know how for a long time, you could find those metal water fountains in a hallway, right, in schools, and you could trace that back to another pandemic, actually, the cholera outbreak in the late 1800s, when there wasn't enough clean water in the workplace. So that was a positive outcome. So then the question is, what other aspects will we look back from the future and go, what came out of that got us in a good place? Well, I think we were just hinting at it. Personal choice is great. You can be more engaged, especially if you've been taught how aware you are about what work style you need during the day and how to go find it, how to make an office, like Kay was just saying, a destination space, because collaboration's precious now. It's not just something that kind of accidentally happens. I think that's big. From a technology perspective, my favorite pet peeve is going to be the final end of what I would call like an enterprise phone booth, the old video conferencing systems that got deployed. I think the return to work era, the hybrid era, will create an expectation in users that I can walk into a space and that space embraces me and my ecosystem, meaning my personal choice about how I want to make a video call, or who I want to inform that I just walked in that room so they can come find me and maybe join me physically or not. How I control the lighting and the shades or any of that stuff will come in with me. It's a concept that I talk about a lot lately because it's got this term called bring your own meeting. It's like you walk around with you, your meeting comes with you. It also involves things like your calendar, all that. So infrastructure will get minimized. K is the word, like minimalism. I think we're definitely entering into that era. Infrastructure will be boiled down to the camera, the group series camera, a really big, beautiful display, stuff you can't carry in your backpack, ceiling mics, but none of that is stuff that has to run on my laptop. My laptop, my device, my phone will control and drive all that. I also think there's going to be a new assessment of privacy and connectedness. So some of the projects that I've been involved in are things like auto booking a room as soon as you walk in because the camera knows you came in, and we know through a token or something that you have a calendar that is a video enabled room system. So let's go ahead and start your call immediately. That means we have to be hypersensitive to privacy. I don't want to know who you are. I want to know what your intent is, and that's quite different. So I think those systems will be accepted by the younger generations and really embraced because it brings a lot of value. And at the same time, there'll be new innovation to get us away from, selling people's data and all that stuff. I think that's going to be a big, big dialogue over the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, I often say to our clients that the things that we can't get away from, and you touched on all of these, is the screen, the camera, the microphone, and the speakers. They will always be required. And a lot of our clients are actually bringing, like you said, bring your own meeting. They walk around with their laptops. There's no PC in the room. You mentioned before that the codec is now gone or dying, and we're moving away to a UCC, Unified Communications Platform, and now people are walking in with their laptop, connecting up to the device, whether it be via cables or wirelessly, and running the meeting from their device. They have all the information at hand. They have all their calendar, all their files. Everything is just there. So how do we make that a seamless experience and utilize the infrastructure? The other thing to factor in, what we're seeing a lot more of, is that all those devices that we spoke about are all also residing on the network. Speakers, microphones are all on the network these days, cameras, and also control of screens. So, to your point and to Kay's point, there is this minimalistic approach now. There is very, very little equipment other than those 4 technologies that are actually required in a space.
Yeah, I mean, Pete, that's an awesome point. I would add to it the other piece that's not in the room that's going to be really important is the artificial intelligence that drives that experience. So if you look at where I spend a lot of my time these days, we're working on AI systems that predict, what's the best experience for this user? How do we provide analytics for the people that are running facilities and maintenance, and to making decisions that avoid issues ahead of time, allow you to really make the most of maybe I'm doing a 4-hour visit to the campus and then I'm going to go home and work home the rest of the day. That 4 hours is really, really important and should be super, super streamlined for me. Find a space, drive to a new meeting. If I get booted out of a room, how does the system suggest the next room over and know that that's going to be a good experience for me and things. So there is that AI sort of workplace assistant kind of concept that's really, really going to be big.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally agree. Kay, you mentioned before about, the workplace is going to be a place to socialize and sort of gather for meetings and so on. So how would this trend of the physical space or spaces, how will that affect the way that we design our workplaces moving forward? Like, for example, what I would love to know is we're so used to taking these calls, getting on conference calls, sitting at a desk with a screen in front of us. Are we going to see less meeting rooms, for example, moving forward because people are going to be taking their calls from their desks?
Okay, so I'm gonna go for the trifecta here. I'm going to say something I know I'm going to regret or will be used against me. I'm going to try to share my screen and show you something, and I'm going to try to answer a question all at the same time. So Lenny asked a question about coming into the office 5 days a week. It's largely empty. Are people getting lazy? Are they just not coming? What kind of incentives? Lenny, if they are returning to a bad experience, or the old experience, or one that is creepy because nobody's there, so it's underpopulated, and now they've got warning signs all over the place, and directional, and this, and don't touch this, and X's and stuff. All we're doing is yelling, danger, 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 and I want to get out of there as fast as I can.
That
and
sounds
that
like an
is
IKEA
huge,
store, Kay.
right? It's a
That's
huge
my
reason.
experience at IKEA. How do I get out of here?
Right. Well, that's your experience at IKEA is a whole nother thing. We'll talk about that another day, Pete. You know, that's a little bit of a different thing. I'm going to try to share my screen here real quickly, and I want to share something. I think we're doing a lousy job of incentivizing people to come back, and I think we've done a lousy job of really understanding what people are doing. So if they're coming back to connect or to be with people, we need to understand what people are doing. Not every conference room should be the biggest square tangle or rectangular table with the biggest number of chairs that we can shove into that room. We need to get into the meat of what are people actually doing. Hey, is it information sharing, decisions, selling, discussion, problem solving, innovation, social? David Pearl, will there be donuts? 7 different types of gatherings that we have. And then we need to think about which ones can truly be done virtually and which ones really are better in person. And then we need to create compelling enough environments with the right type of things. Not everything is a long commitment, right? Not everything needs technology. Some can be low tech, quick exchanges, fast interactions. And we also need to think about how are we setting these up, right? And right now we're creating these super generic, horrible conference rooms that quite frankly, nobody wants to be in. So we need to up our game. Yes, there are incentives that we should be pushing for, and better amenities. We believe that at the end of the day, many companies might actually have slightly less space because they don't have a desk dedicated to every single individual who are never there anyway, or when they're there, they're in a meeting, and so their desks are sitting empty. So you have slightly less space, but the space you have is actually better. It's more enhanced. It has the best ergonomics, the best tools, things that are worth coming into.
Okay.
Did I hit it? Did I hit the trifecta?
You got it. You got it.
All right,
Well
good. All right, there you
go. Rob, what are some key elements? Like when we're working from home or working remotely, like what do we need to be thinking about? And in particular, like in the technology sectors, what things do we need to focus on to have successful meetings?
Yeah, I think that this ties into a lot of what Kay just said. What's the space going to be used for? And look, I think that giving people the choice is absolutely the first thing you need to do. There are some innovative technologies out there. Facebook announced not too long ago that they're releasing this infinite office sort of approach with their Oculus goggles, if you will. I don't know how many people are going to want to wear those goggles, but I've seen videos of it, and it looks pretty cool. You got your virtual solution in front of you, your screens and stuff like that can't be replaced. But I think that, when you get down to the need for a keyboard and stuff like that, I think that those are the things that definitely are still in play. Some other technology components are things like a good, look, you want to have ideation, right? There's people that are going to want to meet face-to-face with other people. Now, I think it comes down to, could this be done in person or could it be done virtual? That is absolutely a critical thing that we used to say at Blue Jeans all the time, right? Is this something that actually needs people congregating in a meeting room for where it could have been everybody joins from their desk? But I think that a good collaboration solution is absolutely key for, things like sharing a PowerPoint. Or things like, sharing a whiteboarding session. All of these things can be done virtually. They don't need everybody congregating in a single room to have that happen. And then obviously, if you're working from home, you want to have a good quality camera. You want to have a good quality speaker and mic setup. So all of those things are particularly important. I will say, though, that there are some solutions out there, Immersive being one of them, that does a tremendous job of having remote capabilities wirelessly for broadcasting your solution to a screen from your desktop.
Yeah. And just on that, Chris, I mean, you're the CTO, the founder of Mersive Technologies. With what's happened over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, how has that altered? Well, first of all, has it altered your innovation roadmap? And if so, in what way?
That's an awesome question. And yeah, I think any company that works in this space, being the workplace or education, anything that got impacted by the pandemic, it would be irresponsible to not reassess what you're doing, right? I think it's important. I mean, the reason I'm passionate about what we do is I truly believe what we do makes people's lives better, ultimately at the core, right? Otherwise, why are you getting up in the morning coming to the office? So when this stuff all started, we actually paused our whole roadmap in February timeframe of 2020 and then reassessed what we were going to do. And what we came out with is a new roadmap that's going to focus on ad hoc availability of resources as you come in and out through personal choice of the enterprise. So that's really a reassessment of the booking workflow. And you'll see some stuff from us this year on that. So it's things like, can I take my phone out of my pocket while I'm on the way to the office and decide which building should I go to based on my own health assessment of which one's busy? I want to be in a busy space, or which one's not. So live heat maps and things will is the more starting point for a room booking experience. Then you're in Outlook on your desktop and you're booking it for 6 days in a row at 10 a.m. with 10 people. That's just not how it's going to flow anymore. So there is that piece. I do want to respond to Rob's comment about AR. I think that's cool stuff. It's very interesting. AR is a really cool technology that has a very dangerous adoption curve, I'll say. I've seen it come and go many times, just like virtual reality or whiteboards or digital. There's this adoption curve that says we almost got it, then the hype curve happens and that kind of goes away. There will be a rise of AR, but it'll be a softer version than sort of what we're thinking with the I can see a world you can't see and it's aligned with my physical environment and all that. I know some companies that are working heavily on, Kay mentioned the environmental aspects of being engaged and in a space that's more destination. They're looking at environmental augmentation of the space. So that's not just lighting, but it's actual texture maps projected into the environment that give you ambient experiences that you wouldn't have based on time of day and who's in the office and all that. So it's some technologies that are more aesthetic in nature than productive, which I find really compelling. So I would keep an eye out for that. I mentioned the AI trends. Those are getting accelerated in a very big way because when I come to the office now, the fact that AI exists and is working very well for pattern recognition, why not recognize patterns around things like Chris really seems to have productive meetings when, there's a window that's south facing because they don't get on whiteboards often. Instead, they're dialoguing in the sunlight, right? So those are things that you will see very soon, in fact, and probably this year. We have a couple things in the hopper that are going to be pretty compelling around what's called meeting migration. How do you find a new space when you're being booted out of a current space, and how do you make that an elegant, easy to understand experience? So yeah, I would keep an eye on some of those big themes for sure.
That's awesome that you guys are looking into that, because these are the kinds of problems that our clients have, that we're talking to them. These are real problems that need to be solved. So I'm glad that somebody's working on them, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm also, I'm personally,
say, Pete, real quick, the bar is really high there though, because you can't introduce new hardware or new constraints when you're chasing these solutions. It has to be all software. It has to just be deliverable with a software update, right? It has to be.
Yeah, I love that. You spoke about AR, augmented reality. I mean, I think once Apple release their glasses, which is probably in the next 12 months they're talking about, I think a lot of times Apple legitimizes technologies. So there is technology, augmented reality technology. Glasses are currently available. A number of manufacturers have them. But typically once Apple releases it, then it's like, oh, either it's cool or that's the norm. And, and we
becomes widely accepted.
That's right, and that's the thing. So I'm really interested to see what happens once those glasses actually do become available. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are, Rob, on that, on augmented reality in particular. I mean, do you see that glasses will replace screens on a wall and we'll be able to meet anytime, anywhere?
Yeah, I think there's companies out there that are actively adding support for video collaboration or conferencing solutions inside their platform. There's one that just announced their support for Blue Jeans, and AVIXA. Their glasses, their glasses.
I should have warned
really?
you today. Yeah.
So you're the guy.
I'm the guy. People look at me funny. I walk around New York with these glasses on. It's like, it's a bit awkward for a lot of people.
I remember back in, I don't know what year it was like when Google Glass came out. I was in the Silicon Valley at Blue Jeans at the time, and I used to see people walking around Santana Row with Google glasses, and they were making weird facial gestures or hand gestures, and then you notice, they're wearing Google Glass. So you give them a pass. I think it's become much more appropriate now where people just take that for granted, right? People might be having conversations, whether they're audio only or video, through their eyewear or their mobile phones, etc. I think that all of those things have become very commonplace. On the topic of AI, I mean, various solutions out in the market have some component of AI right now. For example, if you're speaking and it's noticing your mic's muted, you might get a pop-up that says, "Hey, we noticed you're trying to speak. You might want to look at your mic." Those are forms of AI.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that. It's hopefully we can remove that phrase, "you're on mute," right? By having this intelligence on there, right?
Exactly. Can you hear me now? Sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes. Kay, I mean, you come at this conversation from a different angle, from your architectural background. What technologies, one, are you seeing deployed to sort of ensure we have a safe workplace? And two, what technology do you see will change the workplace? And do you think also that, do you think analytics, for example, will come more into play?
Yes, I do. I think analytics will come more into play. But here's what I would say. We, I believe, are way behind in the workplace, in the physical space, in the built environment with utilizing technology. I want you to think about this for a minute. I can, from within my house, start my car, warm it up. When I walk to it, it automatically unlocks because of the fob in my pocket. When I get into it, it recognizes that it's me. The mirrors, the seat, the music, the temperature, the steering column all adjust to my preset preference, and my phone syncs with my dashboard. In most work environments, we're crawling under our desk trying to find an outlet. We are so pathetically far behind, it's unbelievable. And part of the reason we're far behind is because if everybody has to have a dedicated space, then you kind of have to go with the lowest common denominator that everybody can afford. But if everybody doesn't have to have the same, and if, then you can have fewer work points, but they can be better work points. They can be intelligent, intuitive work points, so that when I walk up to it, it knows that it's me. Maybe my phone calls automatically go, my stuff comes up on my screen. I walk into a room, it knows I'm there for my meeting. My people are pinged, hey, come, the meetings, the recording automatically starts. We have the ability to do all of this now. Now, we're using the Internet of Things and sensors, but right now we're primarily using it to monitor and track either environmental conditions in a building or who is in a room and what people are doing. And people hate that. However, the second you make it so that it gives me a use and it makes my life better, then I'm going to accept it. So imagine if I were coming to the office, I had an app on my phone where I could reserve my spot. I could see where my colleagues were going to be. I get there, I sit down, and then I realize, wow, Chris and Pete are being really loud today, and it is freezing on this side of the building. I could pull up and I could see a heat map. I could see a sound sensors. I could see where other people were. And before I even stood up, I could identify a perfect spot in another part of the building that might be quieter, a little bit warmer, and near some of the people that I want, and take it and go and move there. Okay, that's when that Internet of Things and sensors actually enables me to do something better, and that's when I'll adopt it, right? And I think there's a lot of ways that we can use this more intelligently than we are right now. So we kind of call that sensor 2.0. That day can't go fast enough for me.
But it's interesting. There is that tipping point, as you say, isn't there? I mean, a good example is Google Maps. So you have to agree to all these terms and conditions to load Google Maps on your mobile device, and you're essentially allowing Google to track you wherever you go. But the benefit to me is I get to know what the traffic conditions are like, and I can actually get directions to where I want to go. So there is that tipping point where the value proposition outweighs the negativity. Obviously, in this case, the privacy concerns.
Well, there's also another tipping point where it goes too far. And we don't talk about this enough, but there's absolutely a dark side to technology. Facial recognition, for one. Okay, so I don't know if he's a Black Mirror fan, but look, when the companies in Silicon Valley are coming out and telling you need to be aware of something, and cities like San Francisco banning facial recognition in public, there's a reason for that. And I think several years ago, when they first started talking about facial recognition, people weren't really worried about it because they said it would take forever to do it. But everything changed within 6 months because of Snapchat, because a whole entire generation had their faces digitally mapped without even realizing that's what they were doing. Okay. And now you look at how facial recognition is being used in China to pull people off the streets or to identify dissidents. Stephen Hawking once said, we are in a race with technology about how quickly it can advance and the intelligence of which we choose to use it. And that, I think, we need to be aware of.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Chris, what Kay just described, it sounded like she wants the office to be like a Tesla. She just wants it to work. She just wants to have full control over it. Right? What technologies is it going to take to achieve that in the workplace? Is there anything new that you can share with us, or if you have any thoughts? We spoke about AI and AR and all these other technologies, but is there anything else? How do we create a workplace to be just like a Tesla?
Yeah, I love being on these discussions with Kay, because it's like Kay throws down the gauntlet. That's the human-centered challenge, and then it's sort of my job as a technologist to
solve the problem.
Love it. I love it. That's the stuff I've been hearing that sort of dream since I entered the AV market, right? As I left the university right away, people were saying, consultants would say to me, the dream is just walk into a room and the room knows you're there and it just starts to operate the way you need it, changes its settings, all that. I think we're getting actually quite close to that. One of the big missing links that, we've already mentioned the other technology stacks that are required. One of the big missing pieces is location awareness. Now, this is relevant to the privacy conversation as well. If the infrastructure knows where I am, you can do a lot of great stuff. Now, knowing where I am and if I'm in a room or not is very hard. I think we cracked the nut in like 2018, 2019 timeframe. I won't get into it here. It's very, very complicated, but it's AI-based recognition of patterns that allows me to know, hey, this user, or at least this user's device, just walked into a particular conference room. As soon as that event happens, I no longer have to touch a booking panel and log into O365 and say, I want to use this room. You can auto book it, right? I know I'm in there. You can even auto book it with the secure token from O365 that says, here's who I am in the meeting title. So you can display that for somebody automatically. That's awesome already. Well, if I already know it's me in the room and I have a Blue Jeans call in 5 minutes and that room's video enabled, shouldn't I just buzz my phone and say, Chris, let's start your Blue Jeans call? Yeah, go. And it just does it, right? I think we're very, very close to that. The missing link has been location services, to be honest. The thing about location and privacy and all these privacy concerns is, yes, there is a tipping point between value and then the privacy issues. But what I've found is that if the value is provided to the user whose data you are using, it's a much better social contract. It's a safer place to be, right? It's okay for me to know that Uber is using my location because I want them to send a car to my location, right? It's when you break that contract and you start producing value from the data that does not flow to the end user from whose data you're collecting, like in Kay's example, the Chinese government, that's really off the deep end of the pool. It's not valuable to me at all for the Chinese government to know where I am for their own purposes. That's bad. So for us as a company, we're always looking to close that loop. Can we collect data that is valuable to the user right there and then, and they understand that value and they say, I'm in, let's do that. And don't use it for anything else, just provide that data back to me. That's going to be key over time, because as we see this sort of room intelligence stuff emerging now on auto booking, on suggesting new locations for you to go, to auto emailing your colleagues to say, Chris just found a room, he walked in and we fired up his call. I see you're on floor 2, he's on floor 3. Don't join it from your desk. Why don't you go up there and work together, right? That's the kind of stuff that starts to unlock when you know location services.
Love it. Love it. Look, we're almost out of time, so I've got one more question, and Kay, you have the floor here. What I'm confused about, pre-COVID, we were looking at organizations like Google and a lot of these tech companies where they created these amazing spaces where you could sleep at work, you could have your own beanbag, your own milk crate, you could play table tennis, you could ride bikes around, there was free food. And the name of this, the reason behind this was all to build culture. Now, have we seen all these tech companies do a backflip with them turning around and saying, that, oh, look, everyone's going to work from home indefinitely, and what is this a trend that's going to continue? Like, what's happened to this culture platform that they spent so much money on?
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot here, because I'm going to say something again that I'm probably going to have to hunt down this recording and burn it. I'm going to say BS on a lot of this stuff. So here's what I would say. Tech companies have always thrived on speed to innovation. That typically happens when people are together and they get inside of each other's heads and they have a lot of social capital with each other and they trust each other and they can innovate quickly. It's very difficult to do that when everybody is scattered to the wind. It's easy to sell and consult when you're scattered to the winds, but when you're innovating, it's harder to do that. And so that's why they've created these campuses. But there's also a war for talent. So you'll know that there were several that were very hesitant to say that people could work remotely. One or two of the newer companies made that statement and they threw down the gauntlet. There is a massive war for talent. And I think the other companies followed suit because they didn't want to lose their talent to people to go to these other companies. I think they told people what they wanted to hear. However, every single one of those companies is gobbling up real estate, is building massive campuses. And they're not doing that because they expect people to work from home remotely. So they're saying one thing, but doing something else. And what did your mother always tell you? Watch what I do, not necessarily what I say, right? Okay, well, that's probably the opposite of what you did. But I just am going to call BS on that. I think, and we're already starting to see some of them say, hey, don't go too far, or hey, if you move away, you may not get paid as much, or hey, we do expect you to come to the office. That's what they're built on. And I just, I think there might be some flexibility in that, but this whole you can work wherever you want to forever thing, look what happened to Yahoo when they did that. I mean, it crippled them as an organization. They came back not because working remotely didn't work. It worked so well, they stopped innovating, though. That was the problem. It's not just about producing. It's about speed to relevance, and tech companies live and die by that.
Yeah. I love it, Kay. That's why we've got you on the panel. You always speak your mind, and and it always makes for a great insights into what's actually happening. You're not towing any company lines, which is fantastic. I love it. Well, look, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today on the AVIXA Power Hour. Thank you for everyone who has joined us live, and thank you for everyone who may be watching this webinar recording at a later date. And special thanks to Rob Woods from Blue Jeans by Verizon, Chris James from Mersive Technologies, and Kay Sargent from HOK. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll throw it back to Lauren at AVIXA.
Thanks, Pete, and thank you to our panelists again. This was such a fantastic and extremely informative conversation today. I really enjoyed it myself. So again, just as a reminder, this recording will be available on AVIXA.org within 5 business days. Your RU credits will be applied to your transcript again within 5 to 7 business days. And if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to webinars@avixa.org. Please join us for our next webinar in the Power Hour series of conferencing and collaboration on June 7th, again at 1 o'clock. We're going to be discussing facilitating collaboration in 2021. So please go to avixa.org/events to register for that. And again, thank you to Blue Jeans, our sponsor, for making this series possible. We will see you next month. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.